fascination that bordered on obsession. I had spent countless hours diving and exploring the mysteries it held, but nothing could have prepared me for the expedition to the Mariana Trench. Our vessel, the Abyss, was equipped with the latest technology, designed to withstand the immense pressure of the ocean's deepest parts. As a marine biologist, this was the opportunity of a lifetime, a chance to explore the unknown. The descent was slow and methodical. Through the thick glass of the submersible, I watched as sunlight faded, replaced by an inky blackness. The only illumination came from our lights, casting eerie shadows on the alien landscape below. We reached the bottom, over 36,000 feet down, and I felt a mix of awe and unease. The pressure outside was unimaginable, but inside our vessel it was silent, almost serene. We began our exploration, searching for new species and geological formations. Hours passed, and we discovered fascinating creatures, bioluminescent fish, strange crustaceans, and plants that seemed to defy logic. But then, something caught my eye. A structure, unnatural and out of place, loomed in the distance. It looked like ruins, ancient and foreboding. Curiosity got the better of us. We steered the submersible closer, and the details became clearer. The ruins were covered in strange, unreadable symbols, and the architecture was unlike anything I had ever seen. My heart pounded with excitement and fear. What civilization could have built this, so deep beneath the sea? As we ventured further into the ruins, the feeling of unease grew stronger. The lights flickered, and I swore I saw movement in the shadows. My colleague, Dr. Evans, tried to reassure me, attributing it to the play of light and our overactive imaginations. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. We reached what seemed to be the center of the ruins, a massive chamber with a towering obelisk at its heart. The symbols on the obelisk glowed faintly, casting an eerie light. Dr. Evans approached it, drawn by an unseen force. I wanted to call out, to warn him, but my voice caught in my throat. As he touched the obelisk, the ground beneath us trembled. A low, resonant hum filled the chamber, growing louder and more intense. Panic set in, and I shouted for Dr. Evans to get back to the submersible. He turned, but it was too late. From the shadows, figures emerged, grotesque, twisted forms that defied explanation. They moved with unnatural speed, surrounding Dr. Evans. He screamed, a sound that chilled me to my core, and then he was gone, pulled into the darkness. I stumbled back, barely making it to the submersible. Sealing the hatch, I tried to calm my racing heart. I watched through the porthole as the creatures closed in on the vessel, their eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence. With trembling hands, I initiated the ascent. The submersible lurched, and I feared we wouldn't make it. But slowly, we began to rise, leaving the horrors of the deep behind. The journey to the surface was agonizingly slow. I kept expecting the creatures to break through, to drag me back into the abyss. But finally we breached the surface, and I gasped for air, overwhelmed with relief. Back on the ship, I tried to explain what had happened, but no one believed me. The footage from the submersible was corrupted, the symbols and creatures erased as if they never existed. Dr. Evans was declared lost at sea. A tragic accident, they said. But I knew the truth. The ocean held secrets, ancient and terrible, and we had trespassed where we didn't belong. The memory of those glowing eyes haunted me, a reminder of the darkness that lurks in the depths. I vowed never to return to the deep, but even now I can't escape the feeling that something from those ruins had followed me, watching, waiting for the day I slipped back into the abyss. Days later, I couldn't shake the nightmares. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those twisted forms reaching for me. I began to notice strange things. My reflection in the mirror would sometimes seem delayed, moving a fraction of a second too late, as if something else was imitating me. The ship's crew started to complain about odd noises at night, whispers that seemed to come from the ocean itself. The engineer, Rodriguez, swore he saw something climb up the side of the vessel during the night shift. But when we investigated, there was nothing there, only wet, slimy marks on the hull. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the sea around us turned unnaturally calm. The water, usually in constant motion, was still as glass. Then, without warning, the ship's lights flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. We were adrift in the middle of the ocean, surrounded by the vast, silent abyss. We tried to restart the engines, but they wouldn't respond. Panic set in among the crew, and I could feel the tension rising. It was then that I noticed a faint glow beneath the water, slowly circling the ship. The glow grew brighter, and I recognized the same eerie light from the obelisk in the ruins. The crew watched in horror as the light circled us, faster and faster, until it suddenly vanished, leaving us in darkness once more. The next day, one of the crew members, Davis, went missing. We searched the entire ship, but there was no trace of him. His belongings were still in his cabin, but it was as if he had simply vanished into thin air. The crew was on edge, whispering about curses and ancient gods, and I couldn't help but wonder if we had indeed awakened something that should have been left alone. That night I heard a soft tapping on my cabin window, as if someone was gently knocking. When I looked, I saw nothing but the dark ocean beyond, but the tapping continued, growing more insistent, until it became a frantic pounding. I backed away, my heart racing, and the noise stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The following day, the ship's navigator, Hayes, reported that we were off course. Despite our best efforts, the ship seemed to be drifting toward a massive storm on the horizon. We tried to change direction, but it was as if an invisible force was pulling us into the storm. The crew worked frantically to regain control, but it was no use. The storm consumed us, and the ship was tossed like a toy in the waves. As the storm raged around us, I saw something in the clouds, vague, shadowy shapes that seemed to be watching us. Lightning flashed, illuminating their grotesque forms for just a moment. But it was enough. They were the same creatures from the ruins, now haunting us from the skies. In the chaos, the ship's radio crackled to life, but instead of a distress signal, a voice came through, deep, distorted, and speaking in a language I couldn't understand. The voice grew louder, filling the entire ship, and then, just as suddenly, it stopped, leaving us in eerie silence as the storm began to subside. We emerged from the storm, battered but alive. The sea was calm again, and the sun began to rise. But the nightmare was far from over. The ship's instruments were completely fried, and we had no way of knowing where we were. The crew, exhausted and terrified, began to speak of abandoning ship. But where could we go in the middle of the ocean? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing faint whispers, like a distant conversation just out of reach. When I finally dozed off, I dreamed of the ruins again. But this time, I was standing in the chamber, surrounded by the twisted forms. They spoke to me, their voices a cacophony of horror, but I couldn't understand their words. All I knew was that they wanted something I had taken, or something they had left behind. When I woke, I found a small object on my nightstand, something I had never seen before. It was a piece of the obelisk, the same glowing stone that Dr. Evans had touched. How it had come to be on the ship, in my cabin, I had no idea, but I knew it was a message, a reminder that the horrors of the deep were not finished with me. As the days dragged on, the crew's morale plummeted. We were lost, with no way to contact the outside world, and strange occurrences continued to plague us. Food began to spoil faster than normal, and the water we had stored started to taste briny, as if the ocean was seeping into everything. One by one, the crew members began to lose hope. Some started muttering to themselves, as if in conversation with unseen entities. Others withdrew completely, staring blankly at the horizon. I felt the darkness closing in, the same darkness from the ruins, creeping into our minds, our souls. Then, one night I awoke to find the ship completely silent. I ventured out onto the deck and found that the remaining crew had vanished, leaving behind only their empty clothes and personal belongings. It was as if they had been plucked from existence, taken by the abyss itself. I was alone, adrift on the endless ocean, with only the memories of the ruins and the twisted forms for company. I tried to steer the ship, but it was no use. I was at the mercy of the currents, drawn ever closer to the place where it all began. And then I saw it, the glow of the obelisk beneath the water, calling me back to the ruins, back to the darkness. I knew I had no choice. The ocean had claimed me, and there was no escaping its grasp. With trembling hands, I steered the ship toward the light, toward the final descent into the abyss. As the water closed in around me, I felt the presence of the twisted forms, waiting to welcome me into their world. The last thing I saw was the obelisk, its symbols glowing brighter than ever as I slipped into the cold embrace of the deep. Even now, as I recount this tale, I can feel their eyes on me, watching, waiting. I know that someday they will come for me, and I will be pulled back into the abyss. Until then, I remain haunted by the memories of that expedition, knowing that the ocean's secrets are far more terrible than I could have ever imagined.